Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. You're welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, the ACCPA. We are very glad that all of you could make time to join us for today's session. It's 10 a.m. on the dots, which is 12 p.m. In Central European time. So we are going to begin the conversation. As we believe that most of you, today is a Tuesday, might have other things to attend to, so we want to be as concise as possible. So again, I welcome all of you. My name is Paul Frimpong. I'm from the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory as Executive Director. And today we are privileged to have our very own Dr. Isaac Ankra, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the ACCPA. We're supposed to have Sophia join us. Unfortunately, some emergency has come up at her end, so she couldn't make it. She sent her regard. Hopefully, we'll get her on our next webinar. So today is just going to be Isaac and myself to bring you the discussions as we plan. We have it on China's global initiatives, navigating the balance between development and geopolitics. And today is the Tuesday, the 14th day of May, 2024. Now, briefly, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, probably not joining of our previous webinar, I'll take this opportunity to just tell you about what the ACCPA is. So the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, ACCPA, is a full-fledged think tank research advisory firm headquartered here in Accra, Ghana, with teams in the DRC, in Tanzania, in Botswana, in Morocco, Tunisia, Ethiopia, UK, and of course, China. And what we are doing is basically to bring the African perspective to the table when it comes to the continent's engagement with China. We all understand how deep the continent of Africa is in terms of engagement with China. Almost every country on the continent of Africa, there is a China footprint. There is some level of engagement with China one way or the other. And we believe that as Africans, we owe to ourselves to share our perspective and ask the critical question about what do we think about engagement that our countries are having with China? What is our perspective? What are we thinking? What are we seeing? What are we experiencing? And what do we think has to change? What are the challenges that we are confronted with? What are the mistakes that we want our countries and our government to avoid, as we've had with other partners in the past? So that's our core mission, to bring the African perspective to the table, to help shape policy and perspective understanding on the engagement that the countries in the continent of Africa are having with China. And I think it's very important. There's a very important mission, as we know that Africa will continue, countries in the continent will continue to engage China going forward. As we all know, this year is a major year for Sino-Africa relations, because we have the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation happening later this year in Beijing, 24 years after it was launched. We all know the story now in terms of what the platform has been able to achieve, and the challenges and the new dynamics that are in play now. So for us as a think tank, what we do, like I said, the core part is the research work, advocacy work, and also we create platform for dialogues that we are having here today to share our perspective. We also invite you to share your perspective, what you think about some of the issues, surrounding Africa-China relations. And so in terms of this platform, we allow you to actually take part in it. You can ask questions, and when it's time to, we can also allow you to, maybe you can raise your hand, make comments. We can allow you to make some comments based on your understanding of the discussion that we are having. So we want to create this platform as many as we can, as our schedule will allow, so that we can have more conversations on what is actually transpiring between our countries and China. And for us as a think tank, Africa development is our priority here. what the continent stands to gain, benefit, what are the pitfalls the continent has to avoid in terms of the engagement with China. That is non-negotiable for us, and that is our core mandate when we talk about our engagement with China. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we welcome you to one of such platforms, this webinar, where we want to look at what China is proposing to the world, not just countries in the global south, but to the rest of the world, that as number one, the number two economy in the world. Of course, in some quarters, is the number one economy when you talk about the purchasing power parity. But we know how significant China is in the world today. I mean, China's presence felt everywhere in the world, not just in Africa. It's every part of the world. We're going to see China's presence. And they're leading in so many areas of critical importance in human existence. And therefore, we all understand that it comes with responsibilities. And one such responsibility is what we are seeing China do, which is what we're going to talk about, that they have, since 2021, launched some global initiatives. So we want to understand what this means and what are the implications thereof, also for countries in the global south, like in African countries. What do we see in terms of China's global initiatives? And what are the dynamics in terms of development and geopolitics, at play here. So we're very privileged to have Isaac to help us with the first part, where he will take us through a few slides that he has prepared and share his perspective. After Isaac, I'll also make some few comments. And then after that, we welcome you through the Q&A. So if you are very familiar with the Zoom app, there's a Q&A button there that you can use to bring in your questions. You can start framing your question based on understanding of what the global initiatives of China are. I will allow Isaac to brief us on it, but you can bring in your question via the Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to read out a question to Isaac to answer. Also, if you want to make comments, you can raise your hand. When it gets to that time, I'll give you access to speak, and then all of us can hear you, so it can be a comment or question. But if you want to ask a question, I recommend you type it in the Q&A so I can get Isaac to answer them. And then we can wrap it up in the next 45 or so minutes. So ladies and gentlemen, I present you Dr. Isaac Ankra, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the ACCPA, to take us through a few slides that he has prepared, and then we'll come back to you with your questions. Thank you. Isaac, please.
Thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity given to me to share my thoughts on this, topic. And I also want to welcome each and everybody who has joined us now. China's rise or economic rise has been one of the interesting things that has happened in this world. And you could see that from 1978, there are a lot of things that has, gone on, but they've taken the pains to come this far. And it's very important for us to understand all related issues, especially some of the initiatives that they put in place and it's still ongoing, so that we can discuss it and have a feel about everything that is going on. Now, I'd like to begin with a very amusing anecdote that sometimes when I was in school, for instance, we used to talk about it. And it says that if you are stuck in traffic and someone tells you help is on the way, check if it's the Chinese. You might be getting a new road overnight. And sometimes it looks imaginary. It looks something which we have not really thought about, but it speaks to the prowess of China and the speed and the scale of how they take their constructions. And not only that, it also speaks to the kind of initiative that they put in place to come this far, because they don't just do it. They don't just construct roads, and they don't just do it overnight, and they don't do it on that scale. They actually put some strategies in place to come to make sure that this thing goes on. So it's very important for us to understand these initiatives and also, take key from it. And I'll just briefly talk about it in 20 slides. And I would like to break them into three main strands. First, I would like to give an overview of how some of these initiatives, and also try as much as possible to link it with the influence that China really has because of these initiatives. And also try as much as what has been the reaction to these initiatives. And I'll take US, I'll take Europe. I mean, it's transcendental, so I'll take the whole world, try as much as to understand. Also take into what academia, some of us, what we are also seeing in terms of the reaction to China's economic rise. And I also try as much as possible to share my thoughts on how we can navigate and balance the development that we are trying to have as Africans, and also the geopolitics that is also going on. So just bear with me in the next 20 minutes or 30, then we just go. So there have been a lot of initiatives, but the key ones that I can just go on, I'll just briefly describe them. We have the Global Development Initiative, which basically supports the timely achievement of sustainable development goals. And we have the Global Security Initiative, the GSI, which among others seek to resolve disputes among countries through dialogue peacefully. We have the Global Civilization Initiative, which advocates for respect and acceptance and diversity of cultures, civilization. And I remember some few months ago, we had a very, insightful discussion on the Global Civilization Initiative. And I've also written some quite few articles on the Global Civilization Initiative. But I will try as much as possible, because I have a limited time, to focus much on the Belt and Road Initiative, which is one of the, a signature initiative that China has brought, and it has with a lot of influence. And for that reason, a lot of countries have reacted. So I'll basically focus on the Belt and Road Initiative and give you some few statistics and connect it with the influence that we have. Now, the Belt, which we normally call the BRI, is a sweeping plan that promotes infrastructure development across Africa, Asia, Europe, and with Chinese financing. So it's a transcendental initiative, and it goes on not only in Africa, but all over the world. And it's very interesting. China's rise, one of my friends, when we were in school, during our PhD, told me China's rise is more or less like Alexander the Great, who within a few short possible time was able to rise in his kingdom, was able to expand. And I think it's very interesting for us to get some statistics to back our points and for us to understand. And we normally say that without counting, or if you can't count, you can't control. And I normally tell my students that anything without statistics, you can't really appreciate. If we have the statistics, we can appreciate what China is actually doing. And this is what I really wanted to do. I just went to World Bank, tried to get some figures and the analysis that they've done, and I constructed for us to get a picture and a feel about some of the statistics that we have in terms of BRI across the global world. Now, you can see that the BRI includes about 62% of the global population. That is the coverage, that when you take all these countries that BRI exists, the population in terms of the global there is about 62%. That's what actually means. And also, these countries that are involved, when they bring their GDP together, it's about 31% of the global GDP. And you could see that when it comes to the global trade volume that we have, it represents about 33%. And these numbers are not just, they are really significant numbers. And you could see that if you have 62% of people who are included in the BRI, it's really quite huge. It's more than half of the world population. You have 31% of the GDP included in the BRI. It's quite a significant number. And we have 33% of the global volume in terms of trade, happening, or because of the BRI. Then I think there are numbers which really, are significant and worthy of us to discuss and also see. Now, another fact that we can also look at is from the World Bank, the estimate that they did, I think 2023 or so, that if the BRI is completed, it will just about 12%. There will be a reduction in travel time by 12%, and which is quite, significant. Then you also see that when there will be a 9.7% increase in trade that when the BRI is completed. Another fact is that it will be a 3.4% increase in income. That's the GDP of, the countries that are involved. And there's also be a 7.6% of reduction in extreme poverty. So when you combine these figures together, you're able to understand how, the BRI alone is making an impact in the world. Another fact is that the BRI has created 1.01 trillion worth of investment and construction projects in 148 countries, including Ghana, my own country. And it is still ongoing. And that's why I showed you the previous slide shows you if you completed the kind of impact it will have. And we also have another statistic with that China is the largest trading partner for more than 120 countries. So these figures are huge. And if you take time to understand, you really appreciate the impact of even just one initiative that China has brought, to light and to the world. Now, so I stated here that when we collect the facts and the implied development of all the countries that this BRI is happening, then you're able to understand the pronouncement of the influence that China is having at the global stage. It has become pronounced, and that's what I'm trying to say. And the fact is trying to give us, these figures is trying to, put a pin on what we are trying to say. It's not just concocting some figures and trying to say China is having an influence. I'm trying as much as possible to let you know that these are the figures that is happening from the World Bank. And I think it's quite insightful and something that we need to take note of. So when you take these facts, we take these figures, we coalesce with the various departments you are seeing in your individual countries, then you're able to understand that, yes, China is really, come far in terms of its influence, because it can't just happen. If you're having this worth of investment in countries, there's a kind of relationship that we'll be having with the government and with the people involved. Now, so let's talk about the influence. And I'll be using influence interchangeably with power that you have. So from the Global Times annual conference survey, we said a median of 66% across 19 countries say China's influence on the world stage is getting stronger, while just 32% say that the US, say that thing about the US. So they recognize that they recognize the power and the influence China is having at the global stage. And at the same time, they say that this change is this influence is and stronger. Okay. So another thing is that as of 2023, there are more than 62% of the people around the globe believe that China influence is rising. And that one is double the number of the number who believe that US influence is also thriving, and it's also increasing. So we are trying to say that the influence is there, and we are backing it with figures showing that, yes, indeed, China has come far, and it is because of this initiative that they've had. They've reaped some kind of investment, they've reaped some kind of influence because of these initiatives. And we can also see from here, I put from the data from Russia unavailable, World Bank, the same thing. Then he said, China's rise to economic power has vastly outstripped Russia and competes with the US and EU. So this one is a time series, figure, it's a trend, taking you from 1980 upwards. The green represents China, as you can see. It has been rising, the influence has been rising. This one is economic rise. And it just outstripped Russia, who was once at a power, or I think he's still a power, arguably, and is now rocking heads with the European Union and the United States. So clearly, there has been a rise in China's influence. And I believe, again, it's because of this initiative that has been put in place. Now, let's move on from, the influence and the statistics and everything. Now, so how has countries reacted to this influence? And that is where we are trying to establish a point and move to the politics aspect of it. So if you are following me, I'm trying to say that, number one, China's influence has been interesting. A lot of discussion has gone on. Number two, they've put some, this development didn't happen because in absolute, it happened because they were strategic. And since 1970, they put some initiative in place and tried as much to rise in this, to rise to this point. And number three, where we are come to discuss is that what has been the reaction to this influence of China. Okay. So when you take the US, it's quite straightforward. And most of us have heard the news that has been going on. If we follow the news around the world, we're able to know that US has been straightforward when it comes to China's rise. And we have often viewed China's rise as what a strategic challenge. And I don't say this out of my own words. And if you check when Trump came to power, and that time I think I was in China by then, I was having my PhD, and the kind of imposition that he was trying to put on tariffs, a lot of stuff that he put in place just to counter China was really, that was the time that we thought that maybe China and America would be going to war, and thank God it didn't happen, and it will never happen, in my opinion. But the point is that the US, when Trump came to power, he was really upfront, and he really wanted to counter China. And it didn't change, and it has not changed when it comes to the Biden administration. We've seen extreme competition going on. And even 2021, there's something that we call the Strategic Competitive or Competition Act of 2021, and which is a comprehensive legislative proposal. And the main aim was to counter China. And there was a funding for it, and it was about $3 billion to be given to the various institutions just to counter China. And this one is a more, open book. And when you just Google Strategic Competitive Act, we're able to get the view, and you can read how there's a legislative backing to counter China. Okay. So these are not words that we are trying to put out there, that the US has been straightforward and is trying to counter China. It is the documents and the facts shows. Okay. And I remember that in 2017 or so, I was using a Huawei phone, and I couldn't really use the Huawei because there was an imposition on Huawei, something that really happened. It was more or less like extradition from Canada to the US concerning Huawei's financials, the chief security staff or something. I'm really sorry for not getting the fact very well, but that time there was an imposition on Huawei and other technology firms in China, just to exclude them from the telecommunication sector or the network in the US. So right now, when you talk about Huawei cannot use Android platforms or the operating platforms of Android. They use Harmony or so. And this didn't just come all of a sudden. It's something that the US was behind it, and it was all over the news. So the point here is that China, US has been straightforward with China, and they are seeing that the rise of China is a strategic challenge, and has put some initiative in place just to counter China. Now, what about the European Union? For me, I think the European Union reaction has been more mixed. The approach has been more mixed. On one hand, they want to reap economic benefit, or they have been engaged. There has been engagement with China in terms of the economy, investments going on. But at the same time, too, they are worrying about the implication that it will have. In other words, what are China's, motive? They want to know what are China's motive behind this initiative. So on one breath, the engagement has been going on. They are trying as much as possible to engage with China and reap the economic benefits or whatever being the case. But they also worry about what the motives behind these engagement and the influence that it will have on them. So it has been more a mixed approach. And example is the comprehensive agreement on investment, the CEI, which was proposed in 2013. And you could see that as of, but last time I checked, 5th May 2024, before coming, I checked that one, and still it has not been ratified up till now. So you could see that, yes, indeed, they want to, have economic engagement in China, but at the same time, they also try to, see how they are careful. So it has been mixed approach. That is my opinion concerning that one. So what about Southeast Asia? So that reaction to China's rise has also been, let me say, complex relationship with China. It has been complex because you take countries like the Philippines and the Vietnam and even India and other countries, you realize that they engage with China in terms of trade a lot. China is one of the top trading partner. But yet, they also maintain territorial disputes, or there are territorial disputes between China and these countries. Vietnam, Philippines, for instance, there was a mishap in 2018 or so, I remember, that the NTD News, China in Focus, they reported on that one. And I think they were soliciting for, help from the US. So it has been complex, even though they do trade, they engage them economically in terms of trade, but they've also, there are disputes that are there and that they are facing. And they seem to have taken a more balanced approach, and I believe, so they maintain the ties with US to uphold their sovereignty and also engage China economically. So that has also been for the Southeast Asia, region. When it comes to Latin America has generally welcomed China, and that one has been more strategic, and it is actually characterized by investment in infrastructure and energy. You take Brazil, you take Argentina, and it has more been strategic, which characterized by investment and energy issues. So when it comes to Africa, and I think Africa is more positive. Generally, when you take it's more positive, and it has largely been due to the substantial investment in infrastructure. China is, how do I put it? It's investing in almost every country that I know in Africa. Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, there's a footprint of China there. And even though it's positive, but I think that it's also country specific. You could see that the welcoming or the reaction to the influence of China in Ethiopia, in Kenya, for instance, is really high and it's positive. Ethiopia is high, but when it comes to Ghana, it's improving. It's positive, but it has also improved. So even though it's country specific, but in general terms, it has been really positive. That's what China. But in it, you realize that there are concerns about debt trap diplomacy. And I think that is something that we have talked about a long time. I remember Paul giving some statistics about it, about debt trap diplomacy. I'm not going to go into it as to whether it's true or not, but I strongly believe that the statistics does not support this debt trap in diplomacy. But indeed, it's something that has been raised, and it has mostly been advanced by the Western media. And that is where I strongly believe that we can, as think tanks in Africa, we can respond to it based on facts, whether it has been a debt trap diplomacy or not. But regardless, this reaction has been there. The debt trap diplomacy has been a part of Asia. It has been a concern in most African countries, even though it is being advanced by the Western media. Now, I also try as much as possible, whilst I deal with this geopolitics issue, there's a sector that most people have also not really, looked to. And those of us in academia, when we are teaching, sometimes we chance upon some documents and some analysis that I think they are worthy of discussion. And not only has countries reacted to the influence and the rise of China, but those of us in academia, there has been some shaking. Some kind of shape. It is more or less like a reshape in terms of the policy these universities are having in the world. So I just put some statistics or analysis that was done by Statista. I think they got their facts from International Association of Universities Global Survey. So the orange portion is trying to let you know the revised research partnership due to new governmental rules. And the blue talks about the revised partnership due to what? Institutional own decisions. Now, the next slide will explain for you to understand why. Of course, we can't apportion all this revision because of China, but indeed, the rise of China has been part of it. So when you take North Africa, America, 35% have revised their partnership due to governmental rules. And one of it is for the rise of China, which I'll get a quote for you to understand that one. In terms of Europe, we have 32%, which is more than what the 27% who has revised it due to their own decisions. Certain decisions that it took, 32% of it was because the government came up with some policies and they have to revise. Asia and the Pacific, we have all the 27 against 10. Sub-Saharan Africa have 14 against 17. More Northern Africa and Middle East, we have 13 against 6. Latin America and Caribbean, we have 5.5 against 7. Now, the reason why I'm saying that there has been also a shake in this, in the academia or in the academic, sector, is the fact that, number one, this Professor Simon Magnuson from Oxford University, and he said, I think that was 2022 or so, he said, the hostility towards China that is driven decoupling in science and technology is very much a Western and primarily American-led phenomenon. These are not my words. They are the words of Professor Simon. He said, the United States Department had considerable success in influencing policy in the rest of the Anglophone world and Western Europe, primarily in those nations that are white, closest historically to American power, and that share with the U.S. fears about the decline of the West. So these are quotes from Professor Simon from the Oxford University. Based on what he has seen, he gave this quote. And I strongly believe in that because I didn't bring it here, but 2013, there was a paper by Professor Shujia Yao where he started talking about the displacement effect, even though it was an old theory, but he also trying to bring the displacement effect in the area of academia, looking at China and the US and even Europe. So one paper that he wrote, which was published in Economic Review, China Economic Review, was he looked at whether China's outward foreign direct investment has displaced that of the European Union in Africa. So it's really technical, but the point is that at the end of the research, he concluded that indeed foreign direct investment, outward foreign direct investment of China has displaced that of the OECD in Africa. And since then, there has been some people have tried to expand, the research and trying to look at the displacement effects between these two countries, particularly China, the US, in various sectors in Africa. And one of my paper that I'm trying is a working paper. I've already run the regression. I'm trying to look at whether the economic policy uncertainties of US and that of China, whose economic policy uncertainty affects the cleaner production in Africa, in various African countries. And I think when it becomes available, I'll make it, when it's done and published, I'll make it available for people to maybe organize a webinar to discuss in details about that. So the point I'm trying to establish here is that the reaction to China's, economic rise is transcendental. It has not always been in Africa. There are reactions in Southeast Asia. There are reactions in US, where the EU has reacted. And even those of us in academia, we have seen some kind of change and shape in this economic rise. So that speaks to the kind of politics that is going on. Geopolitics basically talks about how economic rise and involvement reshape the balance of power and the dynamics of power. So it's there. At first, it was the US when we were growing up, US superpower. And now China has come far. And I don't think anybody can disagree that China is a what, economic power or what, a superpower. Not even a super is arguably, if not a super, is a power nation in the world. Okay. So how do we balance the politics and the development? And I'm just going to focus on Africa because of the timing and everything. So I'll just focus on Africa, how African countries can navigate and balance our development and this politics that is going on. Because you need to be very careful and try as much as possible to work in a way that it will, get into your own interest, because America is here for its own interest. China cannot, tell me that they are not in Africa for their own interest. So nothing is stopping us. It's rightfully so, because you have to, go in for your interest. And so nothing is stopping Africa to also try to navigate these politics to make sure that they also get the best of interest for their people. Now, what I just bring into two broad points, but I think it's subdivided in three. So we need to diversify our partnership. That's what I believe. We don't have to put all our eggs in one basket. Then we say we are going in only for US. Then in dealing with other countries, we just said, no, we need to make sure that we identify countries that can help us grow and develop. Not just because of politics, we are just trying to follow into and just go in one way. Or if it's the US, we just go in and we just avoid other countries. No, it can't be that. We need to diversify international relations, make sure that we deal with each and every country looking out for our own interests. So that is the first point. So we need to avoid, over-reliance. That's what I've already said. They need to also to engage in multiple stakeholdership. And we build a relationship with a variety of global players, including emerging economies like Brazil, India, so there are a lot of comparative advantages that each and every country has. So you look at it, what can help you. So it has to be that you need to engage a lot of players so that it will reduce our vulnerability. That is the first thing that we need to understand. The second thing that we need to also leverage on our resources for the best, terms. When it comes to negotiation, we need to leverage on what we have to get what we want. And I think that is something that Africa has not, because if not, why will people decide for you how much you even sell your cocoa and how much you even sell your gold and those kind of things? So you need to find a way of leveraging on the resources that we have to get the best, interest for our people. That is how you go in with what you have to negotiate and get the best for people. So this is basically what I have to say. Within, I'll leave the rest in the comment section. Thank you very much for.
Thank you very much, Isaac. That was very insightful presentation. Obviously, I believe that our participant got very, very insightful, update from you regarding the conversation that we're having. Yes, thank you for ending your screen share now. I think, okay, Kwabena A. Mensa mentioned that, okay, mention the name, was it Men Wanjo? I think the Huawei Chief Financial Officer. The issue that you're trying to recollect, recall from the Huawei incident. So you just gave it a name. Okay, but thank you very much, Kwabena, for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are open the floor now for questions, or if you want to make comments, you can raise your hand and I'll give you the permission to speak up. But there's a question here from Safil. So Safil is asking, is China focusing on strategic countries such as South Africa to expand into the continent? So that's a question from Safio, if I got the name right. It's asking if China is focusing on strategic countries such as South Africa to expand into the African continent. Would you like to take that?
Yeah, I it's very hard to say, but yes, in my opinion, I think it's strategic. They didn't just choose any other country but South Africa, which is a developing country. One of the, let me say, when it comes to Africa, I think is the number one in terms of economy, in terms of its economic rise. So yes, in a way, I believe so. But I think how BRICS also came to being can also be looked at, because they were also considering the various, individual countries in the continent who has a significant, significant GDP or so. So it was coined by one professor who did an analysis of these countries, and he coined the BRICS: Brazil, Russia. So they were all countries that were rising. They were emerging economies that were rising. And I think China was very strategic to look at these countries to come, to partner with them. Let us rise together, but we can't do it alone on all those stuff. So in my opinion, yes, we can say that it was strategic and they really wanted to expand through Africa, but we can also say no, because they didn't just choose any country. They could have also chosen Nigeria, which is also one of economic power when it comes to West Africa. So that's what I would say for now. I don't know if Paul can say something about it.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Before that, ladies and gentlemen, again, you are free to bring in your questions. I think we have about 13 or so minutes to wrap up to hit the hour. So kindly send through your questions. If you want to make comments, you can raise your hand. Once you raise your hand, I'll give you the speaking permission to speak, and then you can make your comments. Again, we've been discussing about China's global initiative, as Isaac started by saying. We have the Global Development Initiative, we have the Global Civilization Initiative, we have the Global Security Initiative. The first one was the GDI, the second one was the Global Security Initiative, and then of course, we had the Global Civilization as the last one that was introduced in 2023. And then of course, we already have the BRI, which is in existence, and I think Isaac expanded very much on the BRI, which in itself has made significant stride, not just in Africa, but across different parts of the world. So in a way, as I said earlier in my earlier comments, China sees this as a responsibility, as a major economic power to provide solution to the world's problem. So this is more China's public goods to the world, to solving humanity's challenges, that according to them, they believe that the world needs a new approach of our human existence. That's why they coined what President Xi coined as what we call the global community, the shared future for mankind, that we cannot do it as business as usual, that the zero-sum game, that development or the rise of one country is to the detriment of another cannot be the norm, that we must actually widen the gap, increase the size of the cake, so that everyone can benefit. So the development of Ghana shouldn't be a hindrance to the development of Nigeria, that we can all develop and grow together. And that in terms of even the security-wise, the propose and dialogue instead of confrontation, instead of raising arms. As we've all seen, there are a lot of instabilities happening around the world, Russia-Ukraine war. We all see what's happening in the Palestine-Israeli war that's ongoing right now. The minor conflicts in and around the world. And they believe that we cannot continue if we want to build a stable and peaceful world, that we need to put dialogue at the forefront, that we can discuss our differences. And I believe that is the more reason why they even introduced what we call the Civilization Initiative, which is the last one that was introduced, that we better dig deeper to understand the civilization journeys of countries. And appreciate it, that there's no civilization that is superior to the other. Our stories are not the same, our history are not the same, our journey of civilization development is not the same, but that doesn't make one civilization superior over the other. That we put people-to-people exchange, trying to understand ourselves and different cultures, and building a partnership that they believe can build, on the world that we want, creating a security environment characterized by fairness, justice, joint effort, and shared interests, promoting open, innovative, and inclusive development for the benefit of all, increasing inter-civilization exchange to foster harmony and respect for difference, building an ecosystem that prioritizes green development, climate. So all of these are what we are trying to see. And for me, as an African, and if you look at the continent of Africa and what we are trying to achieve, obviously, we can find almost all of our development plans and our journeys encapsulated in some of these initiatives that is being launched or spearheaded by China. Because we all know as a continent, we have what we call Agenda 2063, which has about 7 aspirations. And when you go through all the 7 aspirations of the Africa Agenda 2063, you can see the similarity in terms of the objective, in terms of the goals and the priorities that we have as a continent, connecting to that of all the global initiatives that China is bringing up and is leading. That we want to build a secure and stable continent. We want to build world-class infrastructure, crisscrossing across the continent, connectivity. We want to put young people at the center of our development, empowering our women and our youth. So it's that kind of broader vision that I believe resonates well with the kind of developmental journey and thinking that we can all understand, of course. We all have the right to question what the motives are in terms of what China is really, really trying to achieve. And I think that's what Isaac did in terms of the influence. Is China really focused on development, or is it really inspired by the fact that they can be very influential in our world today, so that they can decide to choose what to do and what not to do, or really they are putting development at the center of it? So far, so good. From what we are seeing and from what we experience, we believe that it is a kind of call that we all need to rally behind, that we need a collective voice, that every country matters, whether small in terms of GDP, small in terms of population, no matter the geographical location or importance, every country matters. In fact, every human matters. So we have to have that collective effort to build a stable, peaceful world development that is shared, that everybody can enjoy the cake, not just by the privilege. So I believe that it's beyond, I'm sure, that the challenges that comes up with that, China has to rise and answer to those challenges. A classical case, even at the BRI, that we all know, there are a lot of issues that are coming with the BRI, apart from, of course, the real economic importance that we are all seeing, the infrastructure that are unlocking the development of so many countries. Some landlocked countries are now land-linked countries in terms of the infrastructure that has gone on through the BRI. But we all know that there are also economic implications, as Isaac mentioned last year, about the debt-related, debt sustainability levels for some of these countries, and whether it is really worth, taking on all these debts in the name of infrastructure development. Talk about environmental concerns that has come up as a result of these massive infrastructure development that is ongoing. So obviously, those are challenges that I believe will come, and it has come on almost every major program that the world has ever seen. And I believe that it's China's responsibility to rise to some of these challenges, of course, try to be innovative around it. And they've started doing that. In fact, even the BRI, during the 10th anniversary of the BRI, the whole world was on this program. And we can see that now they're saying they're going to be involved in smart, green, smart project, not the shield, gargantuan infrastructure project that you used to do 10 years ago. So it's in response to some of the challenges that has emanated from that. And historically, if you say that because China is leading some of this global initiative, therefore they're going to be imposing and dictating, I don't think so far we've not seen any history of that, because China in itself do not have a history of being a dominant, power like like we have in Africa. We have colonial related issues, we have slave trade issues as part of our history, as we know. And China has not been involved in such, in the history before. So we want to try to understand how that can be a challenge. But obviously, as I said, I'm sure they have to respond to some of the challenges that comes with this. So those are my first few comments. So I think Pabna is asking, did I miss Sophie? No, Pabna, sorry, Sophia couldn't join us because she had an emergency, so she had to excuse herself. So we didn't have her join us today, but hopefully we'll get her on in subsequent webinars. Yeah. So this is from Cliff in Boulder. We know Cliff very well. He's one of our yeah. Isaac, you want to make comments?
There was one question by this Safil. He said, what is the relationship partnership between China and African Union? And that was the first in one question, first in two questions. And so the second one is that African countries establishing investments with China directly again. So I think we can take it, so for when it comes to African Union, there has been some strategic dialogue between, the African Union and China, and it has cut across various sectors in terms of peacekeeping and even other security initiatives. When it comes to infrastructure and development, investment, you also realize that I think the AU headquarters was built by China, right? Yeah, so that
yes,
one too. So there has been some relationship and partnership with, China, and even in terms of education, I remember, I can't substantiate this because I've not seen any, documents speaking to that fact, but I overheard one of our professors saying that, our country wants to develop strong ties with China. So we've decided to make sure that our education sector also grow by bringing a lot of Africans who are good to come and see China, learn from us, and go back and also develop. So I think on the broader side, there has been some kind of partnership and dialogue to make sure that, the African students also come to China to study. And I think in my school, there were about 100 CSE scholarship, and every country was entitled to 10 or so, depending on the number of people who apply. So I think there's a kind of initiative, but I don't have any document to speak to that fact, but I know behind stage, there's a kind of partnership engagement with African Union, which maybe we can look into it. And when it comes to bilateral engagement, of course, there are a lot of bilateral engagements between countries, even though there's a bigger one between between AU and China. There's also, country-specific ones, which have been between countries. I think in terms of energy, Ghana here, I think there's an agreement in terms of energy, development and other countries. So yes, that has been that. Yeah. Yeah, Paul.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think there's a comment here. I think it's more like a response to the question that was raised earlier. That is from Tebogo Lefifi. I know her very much. She's a China expert herself, Africa-China expert herself. So she was just responding to the earlier question about South Africa as if it is strategy for China to engage South Africa. So she said that China has engaged all the countries in Africa but one, which we know is Swatini because of that political issue. So we know that they've not engaged that country. She said that China has engaged all the countries in Africa but one, which is Swatini. I think South Africa is a low-hanging fruit due to its financial infrastructure and hard infrastructure. China has established state-owned special economies outside of South Africa. So, practically she's saying that, yes, you can see that South Africa is strategic because they're low-hanging because they have the financial infrastructure and, of course, hard infrastructure. As you mentioned earlier, the level of development in South Africa compared to most countries in the sub-region, there's a huge gap in terms of what the country South Africa has been able to achieve. Hard infrastructure. Then, of course, she mentioned that it's not just South Africa, but of course, all countries. So, Tebogo, thank you very much for that comment. So it's asking. Okay, so Cesar is asking, how do you view the potential between the AFCFTA and BRI as well as FOCAC program? So the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the Belt and Road Initiative, as well as FOCAC program. So how do you view the potential between these, three, initiatives? Isaac, did you get a question?
Now, can you repeat? I didn't get that. Can you repeat?
It's asking, okay, so it's asking the views. The person is asking the view. How do you view the potential between the AFCFTA, which is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the BRI, as well as FOCAC? These programs, how do you view them? Maybe how do they link up? How do they intertwine? Maybe they overlap. Maybe they share the same, you know. So just asking, yeah.
I think it all boils down to what Africa needs, which has become infrastructure development. And I think that's what the BRI also, looks at. So there's a strong alignment in that area. And so for African trade, China always want to trade with each and every country that, and I told you that they are in for their own interest. They manufacture a lot of goods, and they need a place to also hold. Yeah, so in as much as they are trading with other countries, they also trade with Africa. And that one is about what we need, and that's what they do. So there's a strong alignment, even in terms of trade and infrastructure development. Yeah, I don't know if that one answers the question or if you can add something to it.
Yes, of course. I mean, we'll pick the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. What is really the overarching objective, right? We want to create a single African market of 1.4 billion people. That it should be easier for us to do business among ourselves to promote intra-African trade. And a core part of that is to build infrastructure, right? So it should be easy for me to transport my goods from Accra to Lagos through Lomé and Cotonou to Lagos, be able to do business there, whether by rail or by road or by air. It should be easier for me to. So the whole concept of the Africa continental, creating a single market, it's about connectivity and connecting all countries. And a core part of that, of course, is about infrastructure. And that is what we are seeing the BRI also seeks to do. So there's a direct connection in terms of what we are aspiring to achieve as a continent, creating a single market, building real infrastructure to make sure it happens. Even digital infrastructure is very key. Now, after they launched what we call the Pan-African Payment System, the PAPS, which is to help us to be able to make payments, in our local currency to goods and services that we are purchasing from another country on the continent of Africa. All these require digital infrastructure. So, and we have the digital Silk Road, which is what the digital side of the BRI, that we need to invest in connectivity in terms of infrastructure, technological infrastructure across the Belt and Road Initiative countries, which is what we are also aspiring to achieve as a continent. So for me, they are linked up. FOCAC is a broader, policy kind of platform with, governments and heads of state trying to discuss everything in between Africa and China. Then after the BRI are very specific initiatives that tackles about connectivity, creating a single market, like in the case of the AFTA, promoting trade, which requires infrastructure investment, and the BRI brings that opportunity for us to bridge that infrastructure gap so we can achieve our main objective from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So I believe that's my take on that. Later in the year, we're having our own FOCAC dialogue, which is going to be virtual. So we'll have a whole FOCAC dialogue. We bring a lot of experts to discuss. So you can watch out for that. We are hoping that you'll be able to join us for that discussion. Rue is asking a question. Okay, there was a question from Cliff. I was reading it before Isaac came in. So Cliff too is a Sino-African expert. He's a researcher as well. We've posted him here before in recent times. So he's asking, do you think China's 3-pillar initiatives have any convergence with the Western liberal order, or the end game is to disrupt and reform the order into a China-centric order along the GDI, GSI, and the GCI? So I don't know whether you got a question that Cliff is asking. You think that the 3 initiatives, which is GDI, all of that, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have something to just simple. I think when it comes to convergence, I think they all look at, poverty reduction, climate issues. The way I see it, in my opinion, when I read the Global Development Initiatives, China right now, I think the last time I wrote an article about green shift of the BRI, where there's, some evidence showing that China is trying as much as possible to divert its BRI, investment into energy and climate issues. So I think there's a convergence there. The Western world has been propagating climate change issues, trying to see how we can also reduce it. And so there is a convergence there. We also talk about poverty reduction because the BRI, as I already said, has a way of reducing poverty. When I showed the statistics, if completed, it should be an increase in GDP, to also reduce poverty. So there's a convergence there. And also there's a divergence when it comes to the governance, where you see the Western world, which is more, and everybody knows, more democratic world, or they are practice democracy. China comes with a different approach, which is different. So I think that is where they are having issues with human rights issues. They've raised it so that the divergence happens in that area. The convergence happening in terms of the climate change, poverty reduction, while the divergence happens in the governance and other stuff. And the end game, I don't think it will outrightly, disrupt. I think it's going to reshape the power dynamics. That's the way I see it. I think it's going to reshape the power dynamics. If or not. So maybe you can ask something, I don't know, but yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay, sure. Yes, thank you very much for that feedback. So we've answered Cliff's question. So Kavana, you can unmute now, and then you can speak. I muted you because. So Kavana,
Hi.
Yes, Kavana, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the presentation, Dr. Ankara and Paul, for hosting this session. I just wanted to comment quickly on a very important point that Dr. Ankara made about diversifying relationships. I think it's spot on. It's an absolutely vital aspect of our policy. I guess it's worth saying, though, that it assumes that we have defined our own national interest rather precisely in terms of what it is we want. I'm afraid all the evidence is that we haven't quite defined our national interest. And of course, this has to be government. It's not academics who define this, but academics can help. So Dr. Ankara, if you were to suggest in your writings what Ghana should be pursuing in its relationships across the spectrum, that I think might feed into government policy. But that's the first comment, that we must define our national interest rather than simply saying, everybody come and help us, because that's what exposes Ghana to malign influences. Other countries pursuing their national interest at the expense of our national interest. So, but then the other thing that I want to say about diversifying relationships is that, yes, in principle, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. But I don't think we should make the mistake of missing an opportunity by thinking that this means that all the eggs in our basket must be the same size. China, I see as representing a special opportunity for us, because their development model, which is quite distinct from the alternative, what people will call the neoliberal model, has a lot more in it in terms of its essence that countries like Ghana should want to emulate. If we just see it as a matter of it's a competition and do we choose this partner or do we choose that dance partner, I don't think we're going very far. We ought to recognize in the essence of China's development model and the spectacular success that it has delivered to them during our lifetime, an opportunity for us to make strategic choices of our own. It doesn't mean that we are, quote, pro this person or pro that person necessarily, but we shouldn't see it as being, we take half the neoliberal and half the state-led development model. It's clear to me that the state-led development model, which we used to pursue, that's the model on which Ghana's early foundations were based. It has now been demonstrated, its efficacy, its effectiveness, and its power has been demonstrated by China. And that ought to just give us, number one, confidence in our own reasoning from the Nkrumah era, but also lessons that we can adapt. It's not about copying; it's more about adaptation. So, I mean, I think I'll end it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Pamela. That was very, very insightful. And I think actually shape the conversation very well to bring us to the end of today's webinar. Isaac, I'll give you the chance if you have any last comments, because we're done. If you have any questions, please, I'll be sending my email. You can drop in your question to me. I'll get Isaac to answer. We'll send it to you via email as well. So we are coming to the end of today's webinar. Isaac, if you have any last comments, and then I will just wrap up.
Well, let me use my last comment to answer a question, which I think is very interesting. It says, in terms of diversifying this partnership, do you see an increase of trade between Africa and Taiwan, especially since many African countries are developing tech industry? Well, I don't see it to be happening, because if you track the issue between China and Taiwan, which is basically China, so it's a whole lot of issues. And as of now, it's like a trade-off. If you go in with China, if you go in with Taiwan, as it stands, China is not going to deal with you. That's it. Because they see you to be part of China. So how can you deal with what one country is different than another? So I don't see it to be happening. And with my last words, I just want to say that yes, China has come far when it comes to its development since 1978, but they didn't just, come to this level in absolute. They came with a kind of strategy. And this led to a lot of initiatives, which one is the BRI, which has really, bring them a lot of influence. And a lot of countries have reacted to this influence, bringing in the geopolitics. And I've showed you how these reactions are when it comes to the various, countries and regions in the world. For Africa, I've shared my thoughts, and I think I've also give an insightful one about this. And I think in my subsequent analysis, I'll try to also see, we keep on learning, so we can diversify, but we need to also be very careful, as Kwabena was saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isaac. Thank you to everyone that joined us for today's webinar. This has been brought to you by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, ACCPA, which is a Sino-Africa focused think tank doing everything Africa and China. We are open to partnership in any shape or form. So if you're on this webinar and you believe that our work, relate to your current work or future works, and there are projects in the pipeline that you believe we can be of assistance, or we can collaborate to co-create some projects and programs, please, our door is always open. I'll put my email here so that you can actually send me an email to that effect, and be more than happy to engage you further. Even via the email that you got the link to join the webinar from, you can always send us an email. Sorry, it's Paul F at africachinacenter.org. So just my name, which is Paul F, and then you can add africachinacenter.org to it, and you can reach out to me. We are more than happy to discuss any partnership line that you have. And this session has been recorded. In the coming days, we'll prepare it and to be made available on our YouTube channel. We'll share with you via email. But then again, we're hoping that we'll find you or see you on our next webinar as we broaden the conversations and discussion around Africa's development journey vis-a-vis its engagement with China. Thank you very much for joining. Until we see you next time, enjoy the rest of your day and your week.